Then, Sumin suddenly turned around, pretending to smile at Jiwon, intending to dump the entire bowl of soup all over her. Jiwon had anticipated this, so she swiftly dodged to the side. As everyone could see, Park Man-ju, standing behind, caught the full brunt of the food that Sumin intended for Jiwon. He turned pale, speechless. Sumin babbled apologies, confused about why he was standing there. She was in a panic, unsure of what to do. Park Man-hwan forced a smile and said it was fine. Thankfully, the soup wasn't too hot. But deep down, he was lamenting the loss of his shirt, worth over 1,000,000 won, trying not to lose his cool because it was Sumin. On the flip side, Sumin was asked if she got burned. She said she was fine, claiming she didn't see Jiwon, and that's why she turned back and accidentally spilled the soup all over him. Jiwon stood to the side, watching the two people checking on each other with a frosty expression. She told Sumin to stop lingering around and hurry up to grab some tissues. Surprised, Sumin pointed at herself and asked if she really had to go get them. Jiwon casually remarked, "You've spilled it all over him, so if it wasn't you, then who else could it be?" She then set the tray down on the table and turned around to go grab something. Jiwon turned to ask if Park Man-hwan was okay, pretending to lament that this was his favorite shirt, making sure Sumin, who was walking ahead, could hear. "This is the very shirt I gifted him on our 1-year anniversary." Sumin stormed off with a twisted expression, fuming as she grabbed a tissue. When she brought the tissue back, Park Man-hwan was nowhere to be found. Jiwon simply mentioned that he had gone to the restroom. "You should just chill and sit tight while I go wash my hands." As Jiwon was washing her hands, you could hear someone calling from the next room. Jiwon paused for a moment, then turned back to ask if the person calling her was indeed talking to her. The person inside confirmed, saying they wanted to ask her for a favor. Jiwon instantly understood what the person was craving. She quickly reassured them, saying she would be right there with it in a moment. The people inside buzzed with gratitude for her. Later, Jiwon brought some goodies to the girl inside the room, making sure to bring an extra shirt to avoid any awkward moments. The girl could only express her heartfelt gratitude to Jiwon, feeling lucky to have her by her side. Without her, she wouldn't have known what to do. When she opened the door and saw Jiwon, the girl genuinely brightened, showering her with endless thanks. The girl, whose phone had died and who hadn't eaten yet, explained that the place felt like a ghost town and she was worried about getting stuck, which was giving her serious anxiety. It turned out the girl was Hyeni, who had started working with Young-soo a month ago. Hyeni was still smiling and thanking Jiwon profusely, mentioning that there were people who came before, but when she asked for help, they all just ghosted her. Jiwon asked if Hyeni wanted to grab a bite together, since she hadn't eaten yet. Hyeni's eyes sparkled with excitement as she instantly agreed. The two of them chatted away as they made their way back to the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Sumin was having a lively chat with Park Man-hwan about how she's always ready to lend a helping hand. She mentioned that since childhood she's been super busy worrying about Jiwon. She also added that Jiwon wasn't really a social butterfly back in school, just to fill him in. Park Man-hwan praised her, saying she truly is a good person. Sumin, trying to reclaim her image in front of Park Man-hwan, suddenly recalled that 10 minutes ago she had gone to the restroom to grab some tissues for him. She yanked the paper angrily, feeling humiliated by Jiwon, who had just been staring at her, making her look like a complete fool. If it were before, Jiwon would have automatically brought tissues, so why had she suddenly been acting so differently lately? Just then, someone knocked on the door, calling out to see who was outside, hoping to get her assistance. Jiwon, already fuming from the earlier incident, felt her face scrunch up in annoyance. She ignored the question and dramatically swung the door open, stepping outside. Right now, it felt like they were bringing up the time she helped someone stuck in the bathroom to win Park Man-hwan's favor. Just when the fun was getting started, Ji-won made her comeback. Next to her was Hyeen, carrying a plate of food. Ji-won smiled at Sumin and asked what they were chatting about. Sumin was flustered when she saw Hyeen arrive. Hyeen cheerfully greeted her and Park Man-hwan, and everyone was on board with having another person join the group. Ji-won cheerfully invited Hyeen to take a seat across from her, and Hyeen happily agreed, wishing everyone a delicious meal. Sumin felt uneasy. Why was Hyeni so confident when they were the same age? Was it just because of her face? Park Man-jun sat next to them and asked how Ji-won and Hyeni had suddenly become so close without him even knowing. Hyeni cheerfully mentioned that Ji-won had just helped her out with a few things. Then she noticed his shirt was stained and asked if he was okay, since it looked quite pricey. Park Man-hwan just smiled and said it was no big deal, just a shirt after all. Ji-won, gripping her chopsticks tightly, listened. The gift she had given him, and he treated it so lightly. Sumin quickly changed the topic, saying that Hyeni must be really hungry, wondering how a girl could possibly eat that much. But Hyeni didn't care. She just thought that if she wanted to achieve something big, whether she was a girl or a boy, she had to eat a lot, just like her grandfather said. Sumin pretended to laugh and said, "Your grandfather must have done something really grand, huh?" However, Hyene seemed oblivious to the jab, munching away while sharing stories about her grandfather selling bean sprouts, tofu, and even kimchi soup. Sumin looked down on her, realizing it was just selling side dishes. Ji-won on the side was surprised, wondering if Hyene was genuinely kind or just clueless. After everyone finished eating, Park Man-won said he had to leave early, and Ji-won mentioned she would go grab some coffee, asking the two if they wanted anything. Hyene immediately offered to go by herself. Ji-won declined, suggesting they could go together another time, saying she couldn't let a junior treat her since she was a senior. Sumin then linked arms with Ji-won, asking her to get a hot cappuccino, acting all grateful. Ji-won swiftly shook her off and turned to Hyene, asking what she wanted to drink. Hyene smiled and said she wanted an iced Americano, promising to treat Ji-won next time. Ji-won smiled back and told them to go ahead. She would catch up later, then turned and walked away coldly. Sumin awkwardly waved goodbye to Ji-won, then turned to Hyene, pointing at the jacket she was wearing and asking if it belonged to Ji-won. "When did you get so close to Ji-won? You two have never even talked at the company, but here you are together at the cafeteria. It's quite surprising." Hyene, pressing the elevator button, explained that she had just happened to get stuck in the restroom, and Ji-won helped her out. She even lent her a jacket, which was enough for Ji-won to be her savior. Sumin was taken aback, realizing that the person stuck in the restroom earlier was Hyene. She worried whether Hyene recognized her voice from before. She covered her mouth and laughed, saying Ji-won just liked to meddle in other people's business. "She only does that for strangers," she warned Hyene, not to trust Ji-won too much since she had known her for a long time. "I'm just looking out for you," she added. Hyene, coldly remarking, said, "Actually, it's you who's meddling in other people's affairs. If you like to meddle so much, why didn't you speak up earlier and say you didn't want to help someone stuck?" Hyene stepped into the elevator, completely ignoring Sumin's stiff expression. She pressed the close button and casually asked, "Aren't you coming in?" And, just like that, she went up. Sumin stood frozen in place, panic gripping her as she realized Hyene had recognized her voice and all the lies she had spun. If those rumors spread throughout the company, what would she do? Suddenly, the voice of Manager Kim rang out from behind, asking Sumin what she was doing standing there. She quickly hatched a plan to use him to get Hyene out of the company before her secrets were exposed. Sumin tossed her hair, smiling at the manager and complimenting his beautiful tie. He chuckled and said he would only wear that tie to work, praising her for making the company feel more vibrant. He rambled on about how the female employees in the office were quite dull, while Sumin was not only beautiful but also feminine. Sumin giggled, saying she had been feeling a bit tired lately, but his words were like a boost of energy for her. Hearing this, he became flustered, worried about what was bothering Sumin, and assured her he would help her sort it out. Sumin pretended everything was fine, deliberately trying to elicit his sympathy. She sidled closer to Manager Kim, whispering in his ear and asking if he would like to go out for drinks after work to chat with her. Meanwhile, Ji-won was ordering drinks at the cafe, and while waiting for her order, she suddenly remembered that the manager hadn't gone out for lunch, so she ordered some snacks for him as well. She thought about how the future had changed, with Park Man-won selling off all his most valuable shares, and how Jo Sumin had spilled soup on his shirt instead of Ji-won's. It meant she could snatch away someone else's luck. Ji-won smiled softly, imagining that assumptions could become reality, and reality would inevitably become the norm. If one could foresee the future, would that create a better world than before? In this life, she was determined not to let anyone take away anything that belonged to her. After grabbing her coffee, Ji-won headed back to her office, surprised to find no one had left yet. She glanced over at Manager Kim's desk, taking soft steps closer to him. There he was, peacefully napping in his chair. Ji-won wondered if he used to sleep this much too. As she spoke, she placed the cereal cup she'd bought for him on the table, softly urging him to drink it. He had looked perfectly fine in the morning, but now he seemed really exhausted. Suddenly, a hand grabbed hers. It turned out to be Park Man-hwan, furious and glaring as he pulled her along with him. Ji-won was taken aback and yanked her hand away from him, shouting at him to let go. Then, a large hand grabbed Park Man-hwan's hand and yanked it away. It was none other than manager Jin-hook, who had woken up at some point and was now glaring at Park Man-hwan. Park Man-hwan stammered when he saw Ji-hook. Ji-won was also stunned to see him come to her aid. With a serious expression, Ji-hook asked Park Man-hwan what he was trying to do. After recovering from his shock, Park Man-hwan retorted that he wasn't doing anything. He just wanted to have a private chat with Ji-won. Ji-hook wasn't backing down, though. He stated that even though it was lunchtime, this place still belonged to the company, and if there were private matters to discuss, they could wait until after work. The two exchanged heated words, sparks flying in the air, while Ji-won just gazed in disbelief. Jin-hook then turned, grabbed the cup of water she'd left on the table, thanked her for the drink and walked away. Ji-won stood there, deep in thought, wondering why the manager had helped her. Maybe he was just annoyed that someone had disturbed him while he was sleeping. Suddenly she turned around and found Park Man-hwan gritting his teeth, glaring at her. He mumbled that they would talk after work. Ji-won shivered, feeling scared at his expression. It reminded her of the time he had yelled at her when she suggested a divorce. He had said her existence made his life miserable and that marrying her was just out of pity. How dare someone like her suggest a divorce? He had said it with a fierce demeanor, and thinking about it now made her tremble all over. Suddenly, someone placed a hand on her shoulder from behind. Thankfully, it was Assistant Jang. She smiled and asked Ji-won if they could talk for a moment. Assistant Jang brewed her a cup of peppermint tea to help her unwind and kindly asked if something was bothering Ji-won. Earlier, she had noticed that Ji-won's face looked pale. Ji-won simply replied that it might be due to overworking herself. Assistant Jang chuckled, saying it was because Ji-won worked too hard. She suggested Ji-won take a break now and then, just like she had prioritized her own health after having her baby. Ji-won suddenly remembered that Assistant Jang had returned to work not long after her maternity leave, but soon resigned. Worried, she asked if Jang was doing okay these days. Jang replied that she was fine, though a bit anxious because team leader Kim wouldn't leave her alone. He used the excuse that he had to endure hardships while she was on leave, so now he treated her like a workhorse. She added that she was lucky to have talented colleagues like Ji-won, which allowed her to learn a lot. Then, playfully, she told Ji-won not to suffer in silence. Whenever she felt tired, she should just let Jang know because they were colleagues. At that moment, she brewed Ji-won another warm cup of tea. Ji-won held the cup tightly, bowing her head shyly as she thanked Jang, wondering why she hadn't realized 10 years ago what a wonderful colleague had been by her side all along. After finishing their tea, they headed back to the office and ran into Hyeen. She was still smiling and thanked Ji-won for buying her coffee. Assistant Jang also asked how Hyeen was doing with her internship. Hyeen cheerfully replied that everything was going great, with plenty of seniors offering help. Then she turned to ask about Assistant Jang's child, wondering if she had grown a lot by now. Assistant Jang happily showed them pictures of her daughter, and the three of them chatted animatedly, though Assistant Jang still felt sad about having to send her little one away while she was still so young. She knew she had to work hard to provide for her child. While the three of them were engrossed in looking at pictures of Jang's daughter, Sumin and team leader Kim returned to the office. Ji-won and the others noticed them immediately, and the atmosphere shifted. People quickly scattered to their tasks. Even as Sumin returned to her desk, she wondered what everyone had been huddling together about, laughing so much. Could they have been talking about her? She glanced at Jiwon, frowning, thinking to herself, no way, could she really be chatting and laughing with someone else like that? How could that even be possible? Before long, it was time to clock out. The manager stood up and said everyone had worked hard, so they should finish up their tasks and log off. People got up, tidied their things, and exchanged goodbyes, promising to see each other tomorrow. Jiwon anxiously left her desk, worried whether Park Man-hun was following her. Manager Hyuk quietly watched her retreating figure from behind. Jiwon entered the restroom and nervously checked her phone for the message Jo Sumin had just sent her. It mentioned she had something to take care of and left early. Scrolling down, Jiwon saw a message from Park Man-hwan saying he was waiting for her at the company entrance and to call him when she came out. She had been in there for 20 minutes. He must have left by now, right? Jiwon tried to calm herself, telling herself not to be scared anymore. After all, she wasn't the gullible girl she used to be. If she wanted to avoid another stroke of bad luck, she had to start by changing herself. As she stepped outside, she immediately ran into the manager. He wondered why she was just now finishing up. Jiwon was surprised he hadn't left yet either. He simply replied that he had some business in the management department, which was why he was still there. The conversation ended and Jiwon pressed the elevator button. The doors opened and the two of them stepped inside in silence. Jiwon was still very anxious. What if Park Man-hwan was still waiting for her? She absolutely did not want to run into him. Meanwhile, Jun-hyuk suddenly spoke up, saying if it was convenient, he could give her a ride home since they were leaving at the same time. Once they reached the car, Jun-hyuk asked where she lived. Jinwon couldn't bring herself to look at him, replying that her place was in a quieter area, but he could just drop her off nearby. As Jinwon fumbled around, she noticed a designer lipstick by the car door. So, the manager had a girlfriend already. Actually, that wasn't too surprising. As the car approached the checkpoint to exit, Jiwon spotted Park Man-hwan still waiting at the door for her. He was leaning against a car, staring intently at his phone. As the school van rolled by, he suddenly looked up, his curiosity piqued. Jiwon, tense in the car, raised her hand to shield her face, fearing he might catch a glimpse of her. The car glided smoothly past him. Jiwon was taken aback, then glanced at Jun-hyuk, who noticed how she kept covering her face with her hands. She softly replied with a thank you, her heart whispering a sigh of relief. That was close, she thought, feeling like she had almost been caught in a drama. Later, Jun-hyuk escorted her all the way home, stepping up to open the door for her. "Goodbye, and see you tomorrow, superstar," he said. She shyly greeted him back before heading up to her room. Jun-hyuk stayed behind for a moment, watching her head to her room before getting into the car. He sat there quietly for a while, and when he saw her room light up, his phone rang. The call was from a girl, asking why he hadn't clocked out yet. She wondered what was going on, since he had been so distracted lately. He casually replied, "I can't make it today, so you'll have to handle things on your own." Without giving her a chance to react, he hung up. The car sat quietly, parked outside Jiwon's place. Meanwhile, Jo Sumin was having a drink with the head of the team, Kim. Her expression was one of pure discontent, secretly blaming the cheap, cloying scent of his cologne that clung to her like an unwanted sidekick. While Jiwon was out on a date with that handsome guy in designer clothes, here she was, stuck sitting with this smelly old man. The head of the committee, blissfully unaware of her inner musings, finished his drink and began complimenting her, saying that sipping wine with a beauty like her was simply a match made in heaven. He suggested they grab drinks together more often. Jo Sumin playfully covered her mouth while laughing at him, masking her true feelings. At that moment, he asked her if she had something on her mind, encouraging her to share her thoughts. She simply said it was a small complaint of hers, then grabbed the bottle of wine from the table. Seeing the head of the committee smile, she thought to herself, if we down a few more drinks, maybe he'll spill some juicy details. While pouring a generous glass of wine for him, she casually mentioned Hyeni and assistant Jan, deliberately implying that they weren't fond of her. She pretended to be a damsel in distress, claiming that they had no right to treat her this way. She said she wanted to snap back at them, but if she decided to quit, he shouldn't take it to heart. The head of the committee, hearing this, immediately blew a gasket. He snapped that Sumin wasn't taking a break and that he would handle them himself. In the company, with the chairman, he couldn't do anything, but here, he was the number one. Sumin smiled and thanked him, but she didn't forget to add a little fuel to the fire, saying she really wanted to get along with everyone, but that they were being too harsh on her. The head of the department comforted her, suggesting she drown her sorrows in some drinks tonight, and assured her he'd handle everything else. He then turned to cheerfully clink glasses with her. Sumin took a sip of her drink and shot a glance at him. She secretly smiled to herself, thinking how foolish and easily manipulated he was. Now, all she had to do was sit back and enjoy the show. Meanwhile, at home, Ji-won had just finished her shower, towel in hand while scrolling through her phone. On her screen was a message from Sumin, pretending to care, asking why Ji-won had turned off her phone. She even mentioned how Ji-won had been making her sad lately, but that she still cherished her, wishing her a good night and saying they'd meet again tomorrow. Then came the missed calls from Park Man-hwan, who was really starting to get on her nerves. Just as Ji-won was about to change her number, her phone rang again. Park Man-hwan was calling. Reluctantly, Ji-won answered. The first thing he asked was where she was. She replied calmly that she was at home and asked if he needed something. Park Man-hwan sounded shocked and incredulous, asking when she had gotten home. He insisted he would come over to talk, but Ji-won declined, saying they could talk over the phone. She was really tired. After a pause, he asked why she had bought coffee for Jin-hook today, something she never did. She explained that Jin-hook had bought her coffee in the morning, so she was just returning the favor. Park Man-hwan still wouldn't let it go, questioning why Jin-hwa would buy her coffee in the first place. Ji-won tightened her grip on the towel and countered, asking if he would drink coffee alone if they were the only two in the office. He was left speechless and quickly changed the subject to why she had turned off her phone. She frowned and simply explained that it was because he had been angry with her and she felt hurt, so she turned it off. If there was nothing else, she said, she was going to sleep. Park Man-hwan then told her to go ahead and sleep, wishing her good night and saying he loved her. Ji-won, hearing that, got furious and threw her phone onto the couch. Exhausted, she slumped into the chair, angry and deep in thought.